So in Genesis chapter 1, we have Adam being born out of the waters as Atum of the Egyptian pantheon, coming out of the waters of the primordial deep called Nun. And in Genesis chapter 2, we have Adam referring to being formed from the soil mixed with moisture and given air to breathe life. So there's different genealogies in the Egyptian pantheon being referred to, though the redactor is using the same name for the two different deities. Adam for the Egyptian Atum, and Adam for the Egyptian Geb. And so that hopefully is made clearer. We then get to the creation of woman, and she is not named in the beginning. There is a story of from the Talmud discussing a demoness named Lilith. The alphabet Ben Sira then goes to tell the tale of Lilith being the first wife of Adam. And it directly comes from the Egyptian creation story from Heliopolis that is referred to in Genesis chapter 1, and is the characters for Adam and Eve, the parents of Cain and Abel. In the story, Lilith is born at the same time with Adam, as chapter 1 alludes to, that mankind was created together. And then they were wanting to have sexual union. Lilith tells Adam she's sick and tired of being on the bottom, and so she wants to be on top. This is taken directly from the Egyptian glyph of Nut, the sister of Geb, the wife of Geb, the sexual union partner of Geb, who is portrayed as the sky on top. And so Geb, being the earth, is on the bottom. And so this is what Alphabet Ben Sira is trying to do, is explain a moral concept to his Jewish followers that women must be subjected to their husbands, and the concept of the sex positions determine dominance in the relationship, which is weird, but that's what he's doing. He's also trying to separate Jews from Egyptians, which is the origins of the Jews, but nevertheless an attempt was made, especially that many millennia after, to separate Jews from all things Egyptian. And even today, there's still this taboo of uniting Egyptian with Hebrew, and Egyptians with Hebrews, Israelites, Jews. But unfortunately, we can't pick our parents. That's a common saying, but has deeper impact when you're not talking about literal parents, you're talking about ancestral parents. In the book of Genesis, chapter 1, verse 5. Yeah. This is where they're naming day, or the light day, and the darkness night. The darkness is actually named Lilith, which is where Lilith came from. It's not the Mesopotamian Lilith that is assumed from the Torah, Talmud. And so the darkness, referring to Nut as the sky, she's dark because she's the sky, space. And she only is lit up as the sun and the moon and the stars light the sky. And what you have in chapter 3, let's see, got to get to it here, bear with me. Okay, so what we have here in chapter 3 is it starts off with a brazen serpent, bronze serpent, because all this is associated in the Hebrew word being used here, and so a serpent is being talked about as being able to talk and walk, because the cursing is that it loses its legs and becomes a snake, or his legs are cut short so that he becomes a lizard. But this is the symbolism referring to the Egyptians. The concept for the Egyptians again refers to father becoming the son, son becoming the father, that cycle of life concept. And there was an ancient riddle of what walks on all fours in the morning, on 2 legs in the afternoon, and 3 legs in the evening. The answer is man. And because as a baby you crawl, as a man you stand upright, as an old man you need a crutch. And that was understood by the Egyptians as a symbol of a daytime. You have a baby in the beginning, and the afternoon of life you're a man, full adult, and in the evening time you're an old man, which at sunrise or sunset you die to be reborn again through your son in the morning, as symbolized in the rising and setting sun. And so death was understood in the concept of the setting sun as a comparable symbolism. And during the nighttime, the Egyptians understood a battle between the sun god with the serpent, Apophis, Apep, depending on which language you're using, Greek or Egyptian. And that was the battle that existed every night until the morning, when the son conquers the serpent and rises as the successor to his father, son becoming the father. And the Egyptians even had Seth being the one who battled with the serpent. And other times it was Horus. And so it depended on the story that was intended to be told as to which Egyptian characters were used in the story. And the main story, where Horus battles Seth, or Set, involved Horus tricking Set into eating his seed, so that Set then gave birth to Horus. And it was a branch. And so yes, this is also talking about the Messiah. As we get into the cursing, where you shall have power to bruise his heel, which then the Greeks took on the character of Achilles. Thus we get the Achilles heel. But then he shall have power to crush thy head. That's referring to the Messiah, the son who restores the kingdom of the murdered father, the deceased father. And this role play that went on for a day after day, morning to evening, and then morning to evening again and again, was played out with the coronation ceremony of the successive pharaoh of a dynasty. That the pharaoh then was given the Horus name as part of his title because of that, because he is the Messiah who has restored the kingdom of his dead father as the successor. Dynasties would even play this out. And strangely enough, the Hyksos of the 16th and 17th dynasties had their main god as Seth, the usurper of the kingdom, because they saw themselves as Seth, who had come from Canaan into Egypt to usurp the Egyptian dynasty, the Egyptian rule. And so when they were conquered by Mose in Egyptian, the 18th dynasty saw themselves as restoring the ancient kingdom again from the usurpers. But then you have the 19th dynasty, who again even called themselves by Seth, Pharaoh Seti the First, and so on, Seti the Second, along with the Ramsey pharaohs. They saw themselves as, again, usurping the previous dynasty. And that's where Isaiah and Jeremiah talk about the branch as the Messiah, the baby. Unto us, unto him, I can't quote it. Unto us a son is given, unto us a child is born. Unto us a child is born, unto us a son is given. And upon his shoulders the government is the government. I can't remember. I'd have to go reference it. But all of that is about the Messiah. That concept of the child restoring the kingdom. And And so that's what this garden story is referencing from the Egyptian records, that of the battle with a serpent during the nighttime with death. And in verse 4, and the serpent said unto the woman, which is not accurate, it's not the woman to blame for the fall, as Christians refer to it, ye shall not surely die, because God's told Adam and the woman, don't partake of the tree of the knowledges of goodness and, incorrectly translated as evil. It's actually Ra, the Egyptian god Ra. Because in the day thou partakest thereof, you shall surely die. And so the redactor is telling the story, blaming women for the fall, associating woman with Lilith, from which was put into the alphabet Ben Sira, and having her battling at night, as she is Nut, the night, battling the serpent, confronting the serpent. And the Egyptians had the serpent also at a tree. I'm wanting to say pomegranate tree. There were two different trees in Egyptian glyphs, and I have to refer back to figure out which one is which. Again, I don't memorize, I reference. So my knowledge level is based on how good of a reference system I have on hand. And so that's what is going on here in this garden story narrative in chapter 3, is that you have Nut, or Lilith, being blamed for the fall of mankind, in that sense, as Christians especially like to blame the woman, blame women generally, for all the evils that occur to mankind. And that's a lack of understanding of the Egyptian concept that was intended here, that the redactor is associating the woman Nut in the battle against the serpent, when it's actually the sun god that does battle against the serpent as he dies, and then is reborn, having conquered the serpent as the Messiah, succeeding the throne, restoring the kingdom. And so your eyes shall be opened, and ye shall be as gods, knowing goodness and Ra, the knowledge of God. Alright, and let's see if and so the tree of lives, again, these are plural that have been mistranslated as singular. It's that generational perpetuation of the species cycle that's being referred to, being able to have children, offspring, for generations through this life and death process, similar to actual vegetation, where the child seed is planted in the soil of darkness, emerges and grows into a full tree with fruit that contains seeds. Then the tree dies as the seeds are then able to be replanted, and depending on which tree, because some trees bloom every year, depending on what kind of tree, but wintertime is seen as the death of a tree, as it then in spring blossoms again. And so, again, depending on the tree you're using, depends on the type of symbolism you're using, which is all related if you tie them all together. And then you have the evergreens that mess everything up. Okay, yeah, we see the attempt by the redactor to detract from the concept of a Messiah and blame women for evil in the world, and that's not a good thing to do, to mess up Scripture. Okay, let's see. But you see the curses, and it refers to Adam requiring to sweat, to actually have to work hard in order to survive. The concept of "in the day thou eatest, thou shalt surely die," many people have understood, well, it means 1,000 years, because Adam is recorded as having lived 900 something years. This is actually coinciding with the sun going across the sky being called a day period, where in the morning you're born, in the afternoon you're an adult, in the evening you're dead. So "in the day thou eatest thereof, thou shalt surely die" is referring to that daily process of the cycle of life. Okay, and then at the end he finally calls her Eve. Eve is not found anywhere in the ancient records, and so it's the redactor who's giving her a different name other than Lilith, the night or nut from the Egyptians. But he's not calling Adam Geb either. He's not transliterating the Egyptian names into Paleo-Hebrew. Some he does, some he doesn't. And then some he gives a different name altogether. And like Pharaoh, for example. And even Moses is a partial name, because he doesn't want to reveal the true origins. We'll eventually get to those, hopefully. And so then we get to 21, where Yahweh makes coats of skins, which is actually loincloths, to cover the procreative areas of Adam and Eve, Adam and the woman. And sure enough, the Egyptian glyphs also show Nut and Geb as dressed, as well as their creation origin story as being naked. And so the end of chapter 2, Adam and Eve are naked and not ashamed, or Adam and the woman, as referring to the one particular glyph. Now he's going to a different glyph with Nut and Geb, where they're clothed. And he's trying to harmonize the Egyptian records into one narrative. And then they get cast out from the garden into the Sahara Desert, where the Valley of the Kings are, those who have died. And that's west. And so what the author is saying is that the Garden of Eden is to the west of the Valley of the Dead, which is interesting because of the initial placement of the garden being in the Middle East. And if they're cast out to the east, that puts them into the Orient, the Eastern Orient, India, Persia, India, and eventually China, those areas. And that's why there's the concept that Mormons, for example, understand the Garden of Eden coming from America. And so the New Jerusalem, as understood by certain groups, as to be in America. And therefore, America being the Garden of Eden, Adam and Eve were cast out of North America to the east, which would have been in the Nile region. Pangea was the original formation of our continents, where Africa fit into the Gulf of Mexico, with the United States being above Africa, and thus with the twisting of the tectonic plates, that would correspond to that. We then get the three groups of humans with the flood story, which I'll get to. I should be able to get to them today. And so the flaming cherubim, the flaming sword to guard the tree of life, again, Egyptian. A sword is used by the Egyptian god Ra, as he is represented as a bunny rabbit or a jackrabbit, battling the serpent Apophis, Apet, at the tree, and cuts off his head. And even other Dead Sea Scrolls, or not Dead Sea Scrolls, Book of the Dead, or Coming Forth by Day, glyphs show the cat, although I refer to it as a bunny rabbit because it looks like a bunny rabbit, but it is the cat with knives all throughout the serpent, Apophis, Apet. Alright, so we'll get to the genealogy, or the children of Adam and Eve, and that main Egyptian motif story.